Hello, I'm Kathleen McDermott. Welcome to the Relationship Rescue Summit. There are things in life that we would never dream of, at least I didn't, is having an effect on not only the relationship with myself, but all of my relationships, whether it be with a partner, whether it be with my children or coworkers or friends. So there's many little areas in life that sneak up on us and we just wouldn't even consider it. So that's what we're talking about here at the Relationship Rescue Summit. And today I am thrilled to have Kate Godfrey with us. I'm not going to tell too much about her story because I love hearing she's the only one that can tell it. It's her personal experience and it's her journey, and I just would not do it justice. But I will say that she is a passionate woman about conscious parenting, and she helps other parents find their way with their own conscious parenting and creating their own dynamic family unit. And she's going to share her ins and outs and her successes. And I hope a little bit of maybe some of her step backs that maybe weren't great at first, because I think we all need to know that it's not always easy, but it can be easier if we allow it. So I'm going to let Kate take over. Thank you so much for being here. And I'm excited to have everyone hear about your experience and your journey.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for having me. I'm excited about this as well. I will just dive right in then.
Please.
Okay. So in terms of parenting, let's see here. When I'll fast forward a little bit, I had my oldest daughter, who will be 15 this July, in 2008. And I was always I'm a very independent, very strong-willed woman, you can say. And I went to college for social work. I definitely knew that I wanted to help people in the world, but I was also that kind of woman where I said to my husband, when I have kids, I definitely don't want to stay at home. I'm going to be a working mom, all of the things. And that's definitely, gung-ho. That's what I was going to do. And about 8 months after my daughter was born, I guess you could say, had like a spiritual revelation. I was at a women's conference with my church and listening to a speaker, and I just really got convicted that I wanted to stay home with Trinity. And that was about 8 months in. And, I came home and I talked to my husband, and we'd be losing a full income. And I was making the most money I had made at that point, especially in social work. It's not a very well-paid career. And he was extremely supportive, and we decided that I would stay home with Trinity, and best decision I ever made. So I stayed home with her for a while, and then I got pregnant with Sydney, and it was going well. I liked staying at home with them, and I was living the life and doing my thing. And then we had this couple come from the boarding school we ended up working at. And they were kind of recruiting house parents. So they came to our church and they did a whole, presentation. And I went in there. My husband was always very interested in this. And friends of ours at the time had applied to be relief house parents, which are the house parents that come in every other weekend to give the full-time house parents a break. So you would work 12 days on and have every other weekend off. And the friends ended up not getting it. But while they're telling us about this, while I have like a year-old, a year and a half old and a newborn, Nate is just like lighting up. And I'm looking at him and I'm like, this is not going to happen. I don't know what you think is going on here, but there is no way I'm moving to some school and raising 12 kids while I have a toddler and a newborn. It's not going to happen.
And guess what?
So we go to the summit. And again, I am a woman of faith. And as we're walking out, I was pregnant at that time. Actually, I was pregnant. I had not had Sydney yet. So they're presenting and we're walking out, and I just felt the Holy Spirit say, this is what you're supposed to do. So I submitted to that. We went through the process, and like a lot of house parents go through the process a little differently. You like stay on an overnight for a weekend. The house parents that are hosting you kind of give feedback on you to, the powers that be to make a decision. Well, we kind of like skipped that part. And then we were still kind of thinking about it. We talked to our pastor about it, praying about it. And he's like, well, if this is where you feel God is leading you, then what's the hesitation? So we jumped in with both feet. They got us in the next training class. So we started as house parents full time with a toddler. And then Sydney was about 6 months old by then, October of 2010. And when you first start out house parenting, you are flex house parents, which means you don't have your own set of students in your own student home. You move around and you support the other house parents who may be on vacation, maybe they're sick, and it's called med assisting because it's medical assisting if they're out on surgery or whatever it is. And you fill in until someone retires, maybe quits, maybe gets fired, and then you get your own student home of students. So we flexed for 13 months, which is living out of, one room that's attached to the student home office.
Mhm.
We're carrying around a pack and play and diaper bags, and I'm nursing Sydney, every few hours while he's making dinner for these kids that we're getting to know, and you're moved from home to home to home. But about 13 months after that, we got our own home of high school girls. So you can imagine the overwhelm in a way. And like, I was nervous because I hadn't had teenagers before. We did middle school ministry at our church, and we thought we asked for middle school when we came to the school. We got placed in the high school division, and it was just, toddler, baby, still nursing, moving into this house now, and then bam, here's 12 high school girls for you, 9th to 11th grade. So that was, of course, in the beginning, we always made our mistakes, of course, but you make more mistakes in the beginning. You're getting to know the girls, the dynamic of the home, their relationships with you, how they feel maybe about your kids, because a lot of these kids come from trauma, one parent homes, never really seeing positive marriages, don't really have their fathers in their life, don't have necessarily the greatest relationship with their mother. So we're figuring out all of those dynamics. So there are a lot of missteps at first because, and now that I am on the other side of it, teaching how to discipline and love, not just like drilling down when they're disrespectful, like, what did you say to me? And you can't do that. And, figuring all of those things out and really building that trust with each student in their own personality, their own way, and also trying to build that cohesive dynamic within the student home. So we had high school girls for 7.5 years. As our girls were getting older, we got a little burned out by that. We requested to come down to the elementary division, which was approved. And then for 2 years, we flexed again in the elementary division, which was very difficult because you're just pulled from division to division
I can
every
understand
single
that.
day, sleeping in a different house, or like when you shadow, you go and, as the word suggests, you shadow house parents. You may have a shadowing assignment and then you can go home and sleep at your own flex apartment. But then sometimes that would change on a dime, like, oh, well, now we need coverage and we need it in this division. And you're just pulled everywhere all the time. You never know really what to expect. So that was really stressful. But then we got blessed 2 years in with our own student home of elementary boys. And we started off with 8. And then by the time we left this past September 2022, we had 6. So elementary, you have a lower amount of kids since they are, they need more hands-on, they need to be watched more often instead of, high school girls who are pretty much functioning independently with homework and, not trying to run around a basement and shoot each other with Nerf guns necessarily. So yeah, we did that for 2 years. And that was interesting. It was an interesting flip to go from having my little ones, having them grow up with high school girls, and then flipping that. And then my girls are older and they're kind of more of the mentors to the younger boys. And then we just felt that it was time to go. And so now we are living a normal, quote unquote, normal life. So we are back to the 9 to 5. We went from the 12-2 schedule, like I said, and then we went to a 12-3 schedule, working 12 days on, 3 days off. Those 3 days would always shift. So one day you'd be off on a Monday, and then the next round you'd be off on a Tuesday for those 3 days. And then it would keep going. So now we like to say that we're on a 5-2. Which we like. And now we get to really focus on our girls as they are now high school girls. And people are like, oh, girls, high school girls. I'm like, I've had 7.5 years experience. This is nothing. Not there aren't difficult moments or difficult days sometimes, and attitudes still. They're growing and learning, but high school girls aren't as bad as everyone thinks they are.
I drove a school bus for quite a few years, so I know how the ups and downs of students can be, and the challenges, and it can be very rewarding holding space for them.
Yes.
How do you feel that your own life history, because we know that we are so exposed to generations, society, how do you feel that your own growth and then coming into, you got married, you were having your own children. How do you feel that going into your situation with having all the girls and then the boys, how do you feel about what you took in of your own relationship with yourself? How did that come into play when you were learning now to navigate all these young ladies, plus your own children, and as a wife?
Yeah. I mean, if there's problems in your marriage and you're going in to raise 14 kids at one time, the problems are going to show up. Nate and I have always had a strong marriage. When we initially got married, 4 months into it, he deployed overseas for a 1.5-year tour in Iraq. So that, I really had to come to terms with, what if my husband dies? What if I end up not having children? I really had to face those questions. I was on my knees a lot. It was a lot of prayer. God got me through that time. I think that really solidified some things for me and helped me become, part of, who I am today, and gave me a lot of strength as a woman. And I've always been, like I said, always been independent, but my background is interesting because I didn't grow up. My husband is one of 4 children, and he grew up in a very tight church family, always had people around. His father's side of the family I think his father was one of 8. So it was very big. I came from a very, very small family. I never knew either side of my grandparents. My mom and dad divorced when I was 16, but my dad was really never present for me. But my brother is 11 years older than I am. So as you can imagine, when I'm 6 years old in kindergarten, he's graduating high school. So I really grew up as an only child. So again, that's where I had a lot of my independence. So to answer your question, part of the tension for me was coming into being so independent, and then just wanting to be with my kids, and now having to navigate being with 12 other students who really need a lot from you, especially as a mother in a female home. And really learning to dig deep within myself, really learn that patience, really learn to, it's self-sacrifice, a lot of self-sacrifice. And I know we talk about motherhood being sacrificial, which it absolutely is. But when you have 14 at one time with different needs, especially when you're trying to raise your own and give your own enough attention, because now they're sharing you with 12 other girls who need you all the time. I mean, it's a lot, but you go into that inner well. But I will say, I think for me, I was always quiet. I think in school and growing up, maybe that had a lot to do with just being an only child. I learned to, play by myself and entertain myself and all of those things. But I think I really had to find my voice, as you probably can imagine.
Thank you for mentioning that.
Raising 12 high school girls, because it's like, oh my gosh, they're going to eat me alive. What am I going to do? What have we done? But I learned quickly that you can love and have it be tough love at the same time. There's times for the softness and the encouragement and all of those, but there were times when they were full on disrespectful, full on, coming at you, accusing you of things, all of those things. And I had to figure out, how do I love them? How do I respond to them within that, and letting my own voice be heard and letting them know, hey, now this is the boundary line and this is the discipline. But I will say, to that point, that is where they learned to trust me. And they learned, because my constant message to them was, listen, I'm disciplining you because I care. I'm disciplining you because I love you. And most of them had not received discipline. Their parents were hands off. Like I said, most of them, their fathers weren't in their life. Their mothers, some of them didn't even know who their fathers were. Many mothers were not even involved. But we had many, we call them parent sponsors. Many parent sponsors were wonderful. We had great relationships with them for the most part in both divisions. But the girls really had some tension, with their moms and how they were brought up. And there was a lot of stuff to dig through.
I can't
so then
imagine.
for them to learn to know us as a couple, to get to know me and our personalities, and I can be very sarcastic, so that took some time to learn as well. But for them really to know, like, hey, this woman in my life, she's coming down on me right now, and I don't really like it. But then when you have that conversation, and many of them would be, sometimes at 10 o'clock at night, they want to talk about things or process things, or, something happens and I'm like, come in the office, we're talking about it now, we're dealing with it now. Could be an hour-long conversation, but really letting them know, I'm taking the time to do this because I love you. And once they understood that, that's where the trust came, and that's where the relationships were built. Because some of the girls that I just held to the fire. And I was like, no, this is not who you are. This is not who you're going to be. You're making excuses. You're blame shifting, all the things. They're some of the girls I have the strongest relationships with because I held them to it. I helped see their potential. And really, some of them are mothers now. And they're like, I realize now how I was in the student home. And now that it's flipped, they're like, I want to raise my child how you and Mr. Godfrey raised me. Like, thank you for everything you've done for us. And, as we know, parenting is hard. It's not smooth sailing. Every moment
Not all the
isn't
time, no.
a birthday party. And you really have to teach and correct and guide them, especially when they're trying to figure out this juxtaposition between their own family life and this couple who is trying to raise them as well. But we really, I think, did a great job of establishing a good relationship, not only as a couple, but individually with our girls, and really making that student home dynamic really gel. I mean, all the girls didn't always love each other, because some girls, you're just like, I don't know. Some of them wanted to kill each other at times, but overall, like, they really gelled as a family unit, loved each other. And, it was a family of 16, essentially.
That's a lot.
It's
How
a
did you
lot.
find you and your husband have a great relationship, but let's face it, even the best relationships have their moments because of life and just maybe feeling differently about some things. How do you feel that, how did you both stay on the same page, especially if maybe you had a difference of opinion in how the discipline should be? How did you handle that? Or how did you, the communication, you've mentioned trust and you've mentioned communication, and let's face it, those two things are critical in any relationship. And you really have to start with, when you mentioned using your, using your voice, finding your voice, trusting yourself and finding your voice, but also hearing your own voice. Hearing your, we all want to be seen, we all want to be heard, but it's important to see and hear ourselves as well. So how did you and Mr. Godfrey,
it's so weird to say it now,
I know, establish and work through maybe differences of opinions, and then so you have a united front with the girls and even your own children right now?
Right. That's a great question. I would say for the most part, we just in general are usually on the same page most of the time. But when we weren't, the times that would be the most tension is if we disagreed in that moment. And sometimes, and I would talk to him about this later, and there was probably times I did it to him, when he would disagree outright in front of the girls with me. Oh, that would really upset me. And I would talk to him later, be like, don't do it in front of them, because then they know that we're a united front, and they will absolutely,
They can use that.
Any kid, but especially a high schooler, is going to jump on that and manipulate you. Well, Mr. Godfrey said this, but you said this. Like, so Nate and I would have those conversations behind closed doors later. Or sometimes, like, he really would disagree how I handled it, or I disagree with how he handled it. Like, hey, you went in too hard here, or maybe you went in too soft, or this is what I'm trying to do. So we'd really break that down.
Good.
But most of the time we were on the same page, and sometimes the girls would just laugh at us, because you can't have a picture perfect marriage when you're living with 14 kids. You're gonna fight. They would see that too, but we are very physically affectionate with one another. We would kiss all the time, and he'd pick me up, and we are very goofy, and the girls would see that. And again, going back to their family dynamics, they didn't see that. And part of the house parenting model is you are bringing students in from broken homes, from trauma, to a home, and you want it to be with a marriage that is solid, so they can see that example and see that it's possible, see how to relate, as females. This is how you relate to a male. This is how a male is supposed to treat you. So whatever, and we dealt with a lot of high school girls going after the wrong boys, and there were a lot of conversations about sex and dating and choosing the right boy and really feeling confident in who you are first, because there was trauma from their dads. They were desperate for that connection, desperate for that relationship. So I'm so thankful that my husband is such a wonderful man and a great father and a great husband, that they got to see a man step up and be the father and be the husband that really all husbands and fathers should be, and sticking with his family and loving them well. They got to witness that. But I talked to, even as part of my platform, is really teaching parents, it's okay to have arguments in front of your kids. If you're going to do it in front of your kids, do it respectfully. Don't yell at each other. You can explain to your kids, hey, this is why we're disagreeing, and you can break that down for them. So they learn how to problem solve. So they learn that arguing isn't yelling at each other, demeaning each other, and all of those things. Because I think as a society, we've forgotten how to communicate. If you disagree with me,
agreed,
I yell at you. Or if you disagree with me, I have to hate you. That's not
That's a
true.
whole other
Yeah, we've gone way
Summit.
too far. There's an art to communicating and respecting one another. But even having those conversations, if you do disagree with each other as partners, spouses, whatever it is, take it behind closed doors and don't have that conversation, especially if it's like a discipline issue. Talk about it behind closed doors, see each other's perspective, find the common ground, and then go out as a united front, or, one of you, as long as you both agree, and then talk to your child. And, so they know, like, mom and dad agree on this. And, I understand maybe you don't like it or agree. And maybe dad said this initially, or mom said this initially, but now we've talked. And now this is the solution we're coming to.
Excellent. Excellent. How do you feel? Let's take you personally a little bit deeper. How do you feel that this whole experience, based on who you were before, because let's face it, with every experience in life, we're not who we were before.
Correct.
It's always a grow and expand.
Yes.
How do you feel that your relationship with yourself grew, and did it expand? And how has that made you who you are today? And then, of course, that serves everything else in your life.
Right. I mean, I'd say overall, just going back to finding my voice, I am very justice oriented. So my girls knew if like something happened at school, or there, was a problem, if they really were having a problem, it wasn't them blame shifting or something like that. Like, I'll go to bat for you. I will fight for you. I would do the same for my own kids. But even when I've seen things, at the school, or even at my current job now, like, I am more confident in speaking up about it and saying, this isn't right. This is not how you treat someone. This is, whatever the case may be, but learning how to communicate that well and diplomatically, and just being confident in my voice. I mean, as I'm sure and anybody who has done anything on social media, reels, or putting stuff out there, that's terrifying to initially put yourself out for hundreds, thousands of people to essentially judge you and look at you and, do I like what you're saying, and dealing with sometimes with negative comments. You have to have some, metal inside of you to really be
Thick
strong.
skin, as they say.
Yeah. And be able to take that and stand on whatever platform that you want to say, hey, this is what I'm trying to present to the world, and this is why, and this is my voice, and everyone may not agree, but this is my experience. I mean, I've had people, the trolls, so to speak. And it's been very little because I'm not super big right now. I know as I grow, more people will, have things to say, but who've just like been very rude. Like, well, do you have a license? Do you have a degree? Do you have this or that? Like, well, I have a bachelor's in social work, but I have a ton of life experience. How many kids have you lived with? And that's not to negate any regular mom, so to speak, having 2 kids or 3 kids or 5 kids and all of that. But for 12 years of my life, I have raised over 50 children who are not mine, who are other people's children with lots of different backgrounds. And, these weren't just white kids. They come from all different walks of life, all different colors, different religions. And we've managed to do it successfully while also raising our own kids. And most people can't say that. So I've had the life experience of that. And I think once people see that or realize that, it's like, oh my gosh, or some people didn't, it's funny. A few people didn't watch the reel when I said, this is how I raised over 50 kids. I've had people say, you're the problem with this world producing so many children. And I was like, you didn't even watch it. You didn't even watch the reel. I have 2 kids. I've raised other people's
Can you
kids.
imagine birthing 50 children?
Oh my, and no, I'd be dead. But they just, want to come at you. And, a lot of it is too, when people are trying to come at you, a lot of that has to do with their own triggering experiences. So you just don't
Exactly.
respond at all, or you respond
Exactly.
kindly. And if it's super rude with, with inappropriate language, I just delete it.
Yeah.
But really just having to be confident in my own voice. And I will say, I mean, I hand it all to the high school girls. They help me find it and help me find it fast. And I help them find their voices as well. And really, some of them now are like, reach out, Mrs. Godfrey, I don't know what to do about this. And, every once in a while, give them feedback, or, when they come to visit, and just talk through things, because they're still figuring themselves out.
As we all are.
Mhm.
And I know, I firmly believe that our children are our greatest teachers, and they do come here to teach us. And you brought on, and I do want to expand on, and I'm going to ask you to share 3, if you don't mind. You I love watching your tips on Instagram. And
Thank
that's
you.
where she's speaking of, is the tips that she does live on Instagram, on social media and Facebook. But when I look and listen at the tips from my mind, and it's same with my own mentoring and coaching of women, it's, I don't want you to do exactly as I do.
Mhm.
It may be that it fits you, but at least take and open your mind and maybe adapt something of that kind to what your situation is. And that's one reason why I love the tips. You offer so much support and guidance, but I look at it as really making me, I mean, my kids are grown, but it's still, now I'm a grandmother.
Mhm.
So it still gives me reminders and ideas. And I'd love to offer everybody to please come and follow Kate on Instagram and listen to her tips and have an open mind and let it be an expansive learning process that you can either use and adapt now, figure it out for your situation, but use it as guidance. It doesn't have to be something that is in stone. Could you share 3 of your favorite points that you found were most helpful in raising these 50 children?
Yeah, I will go with my number one, which I kind of fell into as I was, starting out and all that, is disciplining your children in love. I think a lot of parents and a lot of kids think discipline equals punishment. Not so. You don't have, and I know a lot of us, in our backgrounds, my dad was a yeller. He raised my brother differently than he raised me. But it doesn't have to be punishment. You don't have to yell at your kids. You don't have to have that authoritarian rule, so to speak, to get them to listen, because nobody wants to be treated like that. And yes, are there times where we're going to yell at our kids? Yes, we're human beings. We're going to hit that trigger point. We're going to yell. And you have to give yourself grace with that. But disciplining your children in love, staying calm when you're disciplining your kids, because if you're finding that you're upset about what they just did, said, whatever, you have to calm yourself down first. You can't go in like a bull and start ripping your kids apart. And then speaking to the behavior, not to their personhood, like not using phrases like you were bad. This behavior was poor, or this was a poor choice. This is, bad behavior, all of those things, but not them as a person is bad.
Agreed.
You never want to send that message. And then again, like I've already said, telling them I'm disciplining you because I love you. Your kids need to remember why we are doing this. This is not fun for mom and dad. I know it's not fun for you or comfortable for you, but because I love you, we're going to deal with this situation right now. I'm going to explain to you why it's inappropriate. I'm going to explain to you why you crossed a boundary. I'm going to explain to you how maybe you treated that other person. Let's talk about how you think they may be feeling right now. Or how what you do affects other people, and really breaking that down for them, getting to the root cause and saying, I'm doing this because I love you. And every time that this happens or something different, we're going to talk about it, and we're going to have, you can have consequences sometimes, maybe not consequences other times, but this is a consequence for that because I want to teach you to not do it again. I want you to learn from the experience. Probably secondly, going back to the arguing, and how to do it well. I did a reel on 3 ways to argue well in front of your kids. But again, if you can't do it well in front of your kids, do it behind closed doors, talk it out. Don't necessarily argue, so to speak. Don't yell at each other. Don't talk over each other. Listen to each other's perspective and try to come to an agreement in between that, because I know even just coming into parenting, especially people who may have been married and become parents quickly after they've been married, they haven't had time to figure anything out necessarily, and they're on different pages. And then that causes a lot of tension within the relationship. And that doesn't serve you, your marriage, or your child. So really being mindful of that. And then let's see, what have I done recently? Probably, for moms, and it can be dads too, but mainly moms, just really making sure that you take time for yourself. So you can pour into you. Whether it's hanging out with your girlfriends, taking a bubble bath, reading a book, going on a walk, exercising, whatever it is that fills your cup, making sure that you're taking the time to do that when you can, so you can feel filled up, so you can pour out to your kids, so you're not bubbling over with overwhelm and frustration and resentment and all of the things. And that's something you can, if you have a partner, that you can talk about to your partner about as well. Like, hey, I need a night out, so to speak. Can you just watch the kids for a few hours while I go and do, hang out with my girlfriends, or go to this coffee shop, or just whatever. And previous, to you hitting record, I was telling you my family's away this weekend.
Yes.
They're at the mountains. And I was like telling all my friends at work, and I was like, they're going away. I love my family, but I'm so looking forward to just having time by myself because I haven't really had that. And yes, there's a lot of content prep and planning and podcast episodes that I need to do because I just haven't had the time. But this is my weekend to recharge as a mom and as a woman, and just being in the quiet and the stillness and doing things that I want to do with no one needing anything from me, nothing to clean up, all of the things. Any mom listening gets that.
And you'll do it all without feeling guilty.
Yes. Oh, I don't feel
That's
guilty.
so important. We
I don't feel
don't need to
guilty at
feel
all.
guilty when we're
No.
loving ourselves.
No. And my kid's last day was with school was yesterday. So, thinking about how the summer is going to look for them as well. Making sure they're occupied and not just laying around all day. But
Tell
yeah,
us a
it's
little bit
important to
about your
take time.
podcast.
So my podcast is called Authenticate. And it's taken several pivots, but I am back doing it mainly by myself. I'm going to have my kids on sometimes, and sometimes Nate's going to jump in because we did do it with each other for a while while we were house parenting, and just really trying to give parents helpful tips and suggestions if they want to take them, solutions for different parenting issues or problems that creep up, but also sharing my personal experience from house parenting for 12 years, as well as, what our life looks like right now. And I can speak to raising both girls and boys. And if people have specific things they want to talk about from, young kids to elementary, middle school, or even high school, I can kind of cover it all. But yeah, really just trying to make it fun and light and helpful.
And I appreciate all of that. And I do recall from a previous conversation, I would like to finish with one more point that, if it doesn't quickly roll out of my mind, from a past conversation, that when you made a mistake, I remember you telling me that if you made a mistake in front of the children, and I think it was pretty much in front of the girls at the time, but relate it to how you'd like when you make a personal mistake in front of the children, and then how you were speaking to them and reminding them about you being human. Can you just touch on that just a little bit? Because I think that's so important, because there is no such thing as perfect, and the kids don't come with a manual.
No.
And they need to see that even adults mess up.
Yes. I think it takes humility. I think as people, and especially in conscious parenting, one of the main tenets of that is working on yourself as a parent first, because a lot of parents, obviously, we're human beings. We come from with our own baggage, so to speak, from the way we were raised. And some of us were raised by amazing parents who you may still have amazing relationships with. Some people weren't. Maybe the way they were raised was very difficult, or maybe it was just kind of blah. You never know. Maybe it was a 1-parent home, 2-parent home. Everybody's dynamics look different, but that affects how your perspective, your worldview, maybe what you even think about parenting. And some people, I think, can maybe say, I'll never raise my kids the way I was raised. And you go all the way the other direction. And that's too far. So if you were raised in a very authoritarian home, maybe you are super permissive, and that's not going to work for you either. Or maybe if it was a super permissive home and you didn't like that, maybe you go all the way to authoritarian. But there's that nice middle ground where it's authoritative, where it's loving and kind and fun, but there's the discipline that comes in there as well. But I think a lot of it comes from self-awareness, your own baggage from your past, as well as maybe what you're dealing with now, including, how did your day just go? If you go to work, how was your day? And are you bringing some of that frustration or overwhelm or exhaustion into your home when you're coming home to your kids that night? Or even if you're a stay-at-home mom, are you so burnt out by, 3 p.m. because you've been at home with the kids all day? Is that affecting how you're responding and reacting? But I think you just really have to be self-aware, and that in itself is a work in progress. Sometimes it's a moment by moment thing or day by day, but really having and learning that humility, that when you do mess up, when you do yell at your kids, to go back and say, I'm sorry that I yelled. You can explain why, like, I was very frustrated. I've had a really long day. And even though all these things may have happened, and you said something that really upset me, I still shouldn't have yelled. And my day or whatever I went through is no excuse for that. And I'm sorry that I did that. And, really every time I've done this with my kids, the high school girls, they're always so forgiving. Like, it's okay. Sometimes I'm like, no, it wasn't okay, but I want to apologize to you for that. And that really, especially some of the high school girls who I don't think had ever heard that before, it like kind of throws them back, like an adult is apologizing to me, because they're expected to be the ones to always mess up and apologize to you. And that's something we, again, would talk about with the high school girls a lot, even with each other or with us. Like, you may not be ready right now, but you need to do, or you need to go at some point when you're ready, and you need to go apologize to your housemate for what you did and what you said. And it needs to be sincere. I mean, forcing them in the moment where they're still upset, it's not going to be sincere.
This is true.
But this is how you learn to treat people. You need to go
Yeah.
back and apologize for what you did and own it. Really own that and be accountable. Accountability and responsibility, teaching your kids that is huge, but you have to also model that as well as a parent. Because if you're just going to make excuses and that's all your kids ever hear you do, they're going to do that too. They're going to blame
Passing it on. That's
Absolutely.
What torch do you want to pass on?
Absolutely. And we may not always do it right, especially, when those moments of arguing flare up, maybe with your partner or your spouse, like you want to, well, you said this and I told you, sometimes that can start, but then you got to kind of reel it in and be like, all right, I'm sorry for what I said, or this is what I was thinking. I was upset. I was whatever it is. Own your stuff. And if you screw up with your kids, apologize to them. That helps them that softens their hearts, helps them to be more humble and learn that humility. And they will more likely, and I've seen it with my own girls, they will come and apologize when they've messed up. They might need some time to think about it and process it, but then they come back to you and they say, I'm really sorry, Mom. I'm really sorry, Dad. Or they apologize to their sibling or their friend. They're going to be interacting with a lot of people out
All
there.
relationships that we have, and it carries over into everything.
Absolutely.
And I love what you said about owning it and softening. It's beautiful points. I love everything that you offer, because I think, as I said, if it doesn't click 100%, I hope at least sparks the thinking that there is a way. And it's so important, because as parents, as moms, we do get overwhelmed, and we want to do things right. And it can just be, we're so hard on ourselves. So I thank you so much, Kate Godfrey, and please authenticate 22. You can find her on Instagram, and I believe that's your website as well, authenticate22.com.
Yep. And then Instagram, Facebook, and Pinterest.
That's right. Thank you so much. I so appreciate everything, all of your gifts and your beautiful personality, and just your energy is amazing. And I thank everyone for joining us. Please feel free, reach out, follow Kate, and I wish everyone a fabulous day. Thank you.